Morning. Today we're going to be talking about everything there is to know pretty much about Kaparos. So the first um, topic we're going to be talking about is what is the source of Kaparos. If you look inside the Torah, you're not going to find a pasuk that says something along the lines of you're not going to find that. So the question is, where did the minhag of Kaparos come from? We all know it's a minhag. That's the way it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. So where did it start and how did it evolve? So the first time we see references to the Kaparos is in the early Ephraim, 11th to 13th century. They bring it down as a minhag ga'inim. The time period for the ga'inim is around the 7th century to 11th century. So the in Shut HaGa'inim, Shari Tshuva, which was put together in the 1800s, it brings down the Tshuva Mar Shoshana Ga'inim. So the Shut HaGa'inim basically was someone in the 1800s had a massive collection of different shuvas from different Ga'inim throughout history, and he basically put it all together in a book. So over there, it brings down the Tshuva from Mar Shoshana Ga'in, who was one of the first Ga'inim who wrote about this minhag. It wasn't widespread at his time, and he was in the 7th century. And some people consider him to be one of the Savarim, or he was one of the first of the Gainim, which means at the start of the period of the Gainim, we already see that this minhag existed. Just at the time, it wasn't widespread. But we know that he talked about it. The next, we have Rashi writes about the minhag to use a bean plant, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and his student in the Master of it rewrites that some people would use chickens. So again, in times of Rashi, we know that the minhag of Kaparos already existed. The first time, if you're looking at sequences of when Sfarim came out, that you see it referred to is the Mordechai. He writes about the minhag of Kaparos, V'chein nami minhag b'chol chachmei Yisrael u'balibatim, that there's also minhag by all chachmei Yisrael and balibatim. So it seems like in times of the Mordechai, which I believe was the 13th century, the minhag of Kaparos was widespread and seemingly without opposition, based on what he says, b'chol chachmei Yisrael u'balibatim. So it seems like at that point, that's when the minhag was really widespread. It would be at the time of the Mordechai. So the Mordechai brings a possible proof for the minhag in Gemara Yuma, that it brings down Rav Nachman min Erda ikla legabi Rav Kahana from Nahari b'mali yemu dekapuri asu erve shaduk fede le shkol ve'echol ha'inda deheter shkiach tfei v'kulisa. So the Mordechai, basically that Rav Nachman went to Rav Kahana's house on Erev Yom Kippur, and Arabs were throwing livers around on the street, and he told them go and take them because now almost everything in town is all kosher, meaning that since there was an abundance of chickens on Erev Yom Kippur, therefore you could rely on rather than being kosher, and the Arabs probably took it either from the stores because they weren't wanted. And we'll see later that this is a source for one of the minhagim to throw out the chicken guts essentially. But over here we see that a lot of chickens were used Erev Yom Kippur. Now the Mordechai brings down that this isn't a good proof simply because there could have been a lot of chickens because there's a mitzvah to eat Erev Yom Kippur. We all know that it's a mitzvah to eat extra on Yom Kippur, and just because the Arabs had access to a lot of kosher chickens doesn't mean they were all being used for kaparos. But it's a possible proof. Now, at the time of the Mordechai, a lot of the wealthier Yidden would use rams for Elishal, to remember the Elishal Yitzchak. And we'll talk about it later why nowadays we say that's not such a good thing. Next up, we have the evolution of Kaparos. So how did the minhag start? How did it continue to the point where we have it nowadays? So going to the first person is the Mar Shoshana guy in the 7th century, and the Torah who was in the 14th century. Now, in the steps that we're going to go through now, the Torah skips number 4 and 5, but they have pretty much the same thing. So the first thing is a shliach holds a chicken with one hand, and with the other hand he puts on the so he has a chicken in one hand. He puts his other hand on the person who the kaparos is being done on, and he says basically that this one is taking the place of that. Next, he waves the chicken over his head. So again, basically the Zeh Khalifa, Zeh Chilub Zeh, whatever that, all that happens before he waves the chicken. Then he waves the chicken. The person who's getting the kapara says Yeshua Cheshek with Malach and all those psukim that we have nowadays in the Siddur. And this part and the next part, the Torah skips. He does this 7 times. Um, and a shliach puts his hand on the chicken and says and he puts then he puts his hand on the person who is getting the kapara and says tikanes at the pliny ben pliny lechayim v'lein lamavas. So those the last 2 things the Torah skips. Next he does this 3 times, so meaning according to Rosh Hashanah Goyin, you're doing the first 3 steps 7 times and then doing that another 3 times. So repeating all 7 times and uh, a very long process according to Rosh Hashanah Goyin. And then the person who's getting the kapara puts his hand on the chicken like a carbon, and then the chicken gets shechted. Next off, we have the Mordechai, who's in the 13th century. So he writes down the minhag as follows. First, the head of the house, yes, and not a shliach. Last time was a shliach, does it for the person who's getting the kapara. This is the head of the house takes a live chicken, a rooster or ram, and he waves it over the head of everyone in the house. Then they say zeh tachas pliny v'zeh chiluf pliny zeh nichnas l'chayim v'zeh nichnas l'mavas. Then it immediately gets shechted, and the chicken is given to the poor as a kapara for the nefesh. And then he brings down another minhag based on the Gemara that we said before to throw the guts and liver on the roof for the birds. Next we have the Rosh, 13th to 14th century. He writes the minhag in his area as follows. That first off, it's better to use a chicken, being that one of the names for a chicken is a gever. Gever has another meaning, which is a man. So it should be a gever tachas gever, that the chicken, which is called a gever, should take the place of the man, which is also called a gever. So this is the first time where it says specifically to use a chicken versus any other baal chai, and gives a reason why. Now he brings the process as a shliach puts one hand on the rooster and one hand on the person and says zeh tachazeh zeh zeh, and he waves the chicken over the person's head. The person then says bnei adam, and which is basically also part of the psukim that we have nowadays, and then all this is repeated 3 times. Then the person puts his hand on the chicken's head, similar to a carbon, and they do shkita right away, and it's given to the poor as a kapara, and then you throw the guts on the roof like the Mordechai brings. Next off, and this is a very interesting one, we have the Tashbates, who was in the 14th to 15th century. He's the first one to bring that each person should take a chicken for themselves. He also specifies that a man should take a rooster and a woman should take a hen. Now, the thing that he does interesting more than anybody else is he says that the sheikhet makes a bracha on shkita first, before anything else happens. And only after the sheikhet makes the bracha, then does the one who's getting the kapara say gavar takas gavar, and te chalifasi, te tumurasi, te tachti, te kaparasi, which is very similar to the lashonis that we have nowadays. He also brings to say specifically gavar takas gavar, which is very similar to what the Rosh brought, where he says to say it specifically. And this is all after the sheikh made the bracha already. So after the person does kaparos, after the person made the bracha, then the sheikh shechs it. And he also writes that it's not a problem to do it because it's l'tzayir kashkita, and therefore they're allowed to do it. And then the chicken is given to the poor. Now, minhag Chabad based on the Alter Rebbe and Sefer Minhagim, this is also pretty much the way it's brought down in the Ramah. So Erev Yom Kippur, we take a chicken, preferably white, if it's easy to get. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we say zeh chalifasi, zeh tumrasi, zeh kaparasi. Also, the Rashi Tevis of chalifasi, tumrasi, and kaparasi is chesech, which is based on the pasuk chesech chayim l'chol chay, and it's brought down that the malach in charge of giving life to everybody, his name is chesech. So that's one of the reasons why we use this lashon specifically. Um, just as a side note. Then we swing it over our head 3 times, and then we say B'nai Adam, basically all the psukim that we have in our siddur, and then we do the above 3 times. So Zach Alifasi Zatim Rasi, swinging it over our head. It doesn't say that you have to do it while swinging it over your head, by the way. It's just, I guess, something that people do. Um, so if it's hard to concentrate and swing, you're able to say it before swinging the chicken. Um, then we put our hand on it like a carbon is something that a lot of people don't do. I'm not sure why. It is brought in Sefer Menhagim and Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. Um, and then we shecht it. And the Alter Rebbe brings this is brought down in many other places. Also, the Alter Rebbe isn't the first to bring it, but the Alter Rebbe um, brings it as something that we are like to do. Then instead of giving the chicken to the poor, which imagine you do your kaparos, you bring the chicken to a poor person. Look, I brought you a yummy chicken. He says, "Why are you giving me your geschlagene kaparos?" So we don't want them to be embarrassed. So it's better to sell the chicken and um, and then give the money to the poor for food like that. It's not embarrassing to them. Alternatively, you could do kaparos by a place that uses the chickens for poor people. So if it's going towards the yeshiva, there are many rabbanim who said that Blachim are the biggest aniyim. Or if it's going to Kaparos, Kaparos would also be considered giving it to aniyim, even though it might be used for the kiddush, and not necessarily everybody by the kiddush is aniyim, but it's a organization that could use the help. Um, so the mitzvah is most definitely there. It's considered tzedakah. And then the Alter Rebbe does bring the minhag to throw the guts on the roof. This is something which is not done so much nowadays. One of the possible reasons why we aren't like it, even though so many of the poskim bring down to throw the guts on the roof, is first off, there's a Mata Ephraim who brings that when doing kaparos, people have to follow the laws of the country. And since the laws of the country are that you're not allowed to throw chicken guts on the roof for sanitary reasons or whatever else, then it's a problem. But if somebody is able to, I don't know if there's exactly an ordinance to do it on your own private house, and most definitely plants aren't allowed to do it. Um, but if somebody wants to take some of their guts back to throw on the roof, it's a good mitzvah. The reason behind it is that for 2 reasons. First of all, that the chickens benefit from things that they steal, meaning whatever's lying around they take and fly off with, and therefore the things that benefit from the stealing is their guts, and therefore we don't want to keep their guts. Another thing is that we want to show Rahmanis to the birds, that to give them also something to eat, and like that Hashem should have Rachim on us as well. Um, so now the next topic is about someone who's pregnant by Kaparos. So in most places it brings down that a pregnant woman should use 2 chickens, a rooster and a hen. The hen for her and the fetus if it's a girl, and the rooster the rooster just in case it's a boy. Now, according to some, and including the Arizal, the Maril, she should use 2 hens and a rooster. Like that, the child should have its own power completely, and like that, if it's since usually you don't know what gender it is, therefore you need a rooster and a hen for the fetus. There is a disagreement about if a fetus is a limb of the mother or its own. If it's its own being in Gemara and Paiskim. And there's a very important side note. A lot of times we get caught up in political movements that identify as a Republican or conservative, and therefore I'm completely against abortion, and the child is its own human being. And a lot of times we say things because that's what we hear from Gayish organizations that we identify with. But it's important to note that a lot of times things are not that simple in Torah. In Torah, abortion isn't always illegal, and especially to save the life of the mother. And it's a very complicating thing. And if a person wants to actually have a opinion based on Torah, then you have to look at the sources in Torah of what Torah actually holds. So this is an example. There's a topic where it comes up up where Pitera is not so simple to say that the fetus is already its own human being. Um, just think about Baba Basra, and Baba Kama, where it talks about if a person hits a woman and the baby miscarries, that the person isn't Kaya Misa. So this is another example of a topic where it comes up where we have to look at it from a Das Torah, not from the Geisha world. But that's just a side note. And that disagreement in Gemara would also explain whether or not the baby needs its own kapara or not. Now, if somebody already knows the gender, then they only need two chickens. Um, Even according to the second opinion, a hen for the mother, and whatever the gender is, um, then that's what you're going to get for the fetus. So it could be two hens, it could be a hen and a rooster. Um, and then if you take a hen and a rooster, you could say that you're going according to the first opinion, if anybody asks. Um, and then lastly, if somebody knows that they have twins, then they need five because you have a chicken for the mother and then two chickens and two hens for the two babies, unless you already know the genders, in which case you only need three. Um, Fine. Next up, we have the naysayers, the people who say that kaparis should not be done. So this is just to get them out of the way. We have PETA, which does stand for people eating tasty animals. Um, they're not really somebody that we should really care about. It's just we're going to go into this quickly because why not? So the first thing that they claim is that that Kaparis is being cruel to animals, and in that regard, they actually have a good time that Tzar Balakayim is a avera. Kaparis is a minhag and a Avera can't override a minhag. So if there's Tsar Balakayim involved, then kapara should not be done. Um, it's not even a mitzvah, but a mitzvah can't come through an Avera. So, for example, they should be treated well, um, you know, kept calm. This is one of the things is if you want to have, this is not only for the chicken, but for yourself also. If you're doing kaparis, you want your chicken to stay calm. So there are a few ways of keeping your chicken calm. Contrary to what Peter says, there are comfortable ways to hold a chicken. The most comfortable way for the chickens is if you hold their wings to their sides, like its natural position, and you just hold it firmly together. They're not going to be able to flap around much. And if you put their feet on the ground, they're going to completely relax. It's also a school for not getting yourself dirty. Um, so that's the best thing in regards to that. Another way of doing it is holding the right wing over the left wing. This is also going to be good for the sheket. Not holding it too tightly, not holding it loosely. If you hold it loosely, it could try to flap its wings and actually crack its wings. If you hold it too tightly, you could actually choke it. If anybody knows wrestling, um, there's a thing where you put pressure under the person's armpits, and there's a major vein that goes over there, and by cutting that off, you could actually choke a person out. And the same thing is with the chicken. They have a vein that goes into the top of their wing, like the first inch and a half, that if you completely cut off the circulation over there, they could actually die. And then you're going to have to do kaparas over again. We'll talk about that soon. But basically, you hold the right wing over the left wing. Firmly but not too tight, and it shouldn't cause them tsar balakayim. But most definitely, kids shouldn't be poking it, slapping it, or causing it pain because that is an actual avera. And that's the one thing that Peter actually got right is that tsar balakayim is an issue. Now, in regards to the tsar balakayim involved in shkita, so the Rama actually brings down that the point of shkita, contrary to popular belief, is not for tzar balakayim. It's not because the most humane way of killing a chicken. In fact, there is pain involved in shkita, even if it's the smallest amount, which is what studies show. But the point of shkita isn't to minimize pain. It's because that's what Hashem told us. And the Rambam even writes that if the point of shkita was tzar balakayim, then we wouldn't be doing shkita at all. So there's a pasuk that says "V'zavachta ka'ashar tzivisicha." From there, we learn that Hashem taught Moshe Rabbeinu how to do shkita. We also learn from V'zavachta v'achalta that Hashem gives us permission to eat chickens after we do shkita. So now this leads to the next question, which is, should we completely ignore their comments? Should we try to engage with them? Now, over here, I think there's a big distinction between someone who is a yid who means well versus someone who is clearly not in their normal ring. Um, and I'm going to start off with a story. I forgot which Polish Rebbe it happened with, but he was taking a walk in a fancy park in Germany, and he saw a German kissing his dog. And he told his Misharis that a civilization that could love a dog so much is going to kill many humans. Um, which means that when a person becomes too sensitive to a animal, which is a one of the creatures of Hashem, and Hashem says that we should care for their tzaveh, but when a person cares more about them more than they care about human species, which have actual value to it and inherent value, um, then the civilization is in a bad place. And studies show nowadays also that I forgot what the percentages are, but a very, very big percentage, maybe even 50% or higher, said they would save their dog before they would save their child, which is insane. It shows on a very big moral problem. Um, but if there are people who are there and screaming and yelling, so then the best thing is either not to engage with them, or the Rebbe brings in Shulchan Menachem in regards to dealing with missionaries that a lot of times they're not there for logical reasons. Um, the Emmanuel Shafat has a good vart that the best thing to do with missionaries is you ask them, how would I answer your question? And when they say I don't know, you say okay, but there's a lot of these things were discussed before in history. So your logic is that I didn't go to the library and you didn't go to the library, and therefore I'm right. So it's a similar thing over here. Um, and the Rebbe basically says that the best thing to do with missionaries is to ridicule them because they're not there for a logical conversation. If they're there for a logical conversation, they wouldn't be there at all, because they would have found the answers to everything that they want to say already. And therefore, the best thing to do with missionaries is to basically laugh at their and make fun of their what they're coming for. Um, so it's a similar, you could say similar thing over here. They're not coming for a logical answer. They're not coming for you to explain, oh, Hashem said that we're allowed to do it. If they wanted that answer, they could have found it a long time ago. They're there because they think that animal life has full moral value like a human life, and therefore the best thing is, and there's already a minig Yisrael, and minig Yisrael Terehi, is that the Bachrim stand and make fun of them as long as they can. So I'm not saying that that's the right thing, but we see similarities between that. Now, if it's a yid who means well, so then if they're there for a logical conversation, so then you could explain to them that it's a minig ainim, a minig Yisrael Terehi, shkita is a mitzvah from Hashem, and so on and so forth. Then there's a conversation that could be had if you're actually going to be able to change their life. But Al Pi Raiv, that's not what's going to happen. The best thing is to make fun of them or leave them alone. Fine. Now we get to the people who actually have legitimate reasons for going against it. The Rashba, based on the Ramban, found that the whole minhag was Darkei Amayri. It's important to note that the Rashba, in the times of the Rashba, they would do many, many weird things that mamish looked like they came from Gainim. They would, after Shkita, they would chop off the head and hang it by its feathers and just many, many weird things that aren't in any of our minhagim, and therefore the Rashba showed up to Spain and he saw what was going on. He said, "This whole thing smells of Darkei Amayri," and he might have been right in his area also, and therefore he banned it. And in the tshuva where he banned it, he also writes that he knows that he heard from the Ashkenazim in his yeshiva that the Ashkenaz Rabbanim do it, and they said it's okay. And he even said, I know that Rav Hai Gain was matter, and still I'm banning it over here. And he brings down that he was happy to say that the whole thing stopped, nobody does it anymore in his area. So Darkei Amayri, just to clarify a little, Darkei Amayri is not a Avodah Zarah. It's things that Goyim do for whatever reasons that aren't necessarily Avodah Zarah per se, but it comes from the Geisha culture of Avodah Zarah. So, and if I were to explain the Rashba's view a little bit more, if I were to tell you that that somebody was born and he died for our sins, and because he died, all our sins are forgiven. You would tell me you believe in Yashka, go fly a kite. You have nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. But if I tell you that a chicken was born and it's going to die for your sins, suddenly that's suddenly that's kaparis. It's fine. We're allowed to do that. So from that perspective, we're going to see that's not an accurate statement. It's not dying for our sins. We're going to talk about that soon. Um, well, from that perspective, it reeks of Darkei Amayri. Something dying for you, aside for a carbon, which is brought in Torah, is ridiculous. Um, the Beis Yosef also writes that the minhag should be stopped. In fact, that's the entire Tafresh Hay in Eretz Chaim. The Beis Yosef writes um, Haminik sheyesh la'anoshim, trying to remember the exact lashon. Haminik sheyesh la'anoshim lasses kaparis b'arvi yom kippur yesh lumnai. I think that's all he says about it. And then the Rama has entire 2-3 pages on kaparis. But that's the version we have now is actually one of the later versions. Some of the versions have the Beis Yosef rating Haminik shtush sheyesh la'anoshim, or other very very strong lashonos. Where he basically writes that it's a terrible thing. The one we have now, it just seems like he says it's better not to do it. But in some other versions, it seems like he was vehemently opposed. Now, due to the Beis Yosef rating that we shouldn't do it, a lot of Sardim, Taka don't do kaparis on living things. And we're going to talk about why some Sardim do later on. But that's what it is. Now, in the Tshuva of Mar Shoshana Gain, when he's asked about the minhag of kaparis, um, he's asked why some people use chickens, why some people use rams, and what's the reason behind it. And one of the things he writes when he writes that he was asked these questions is he writes Vade Kushyahu. Now, some people take this Vade Kushyahu to mean that he was saying that how people could do kaparis is questionable. Because it's Darkei Amayri. Now, based on his answer, where he explains why a ram would be of Eli Shal Yitzchak and so on and so forth, it doesn't seem like that's pshat, but some people use that as a proof to say that Mar Shoshana Gaon was actually against kaparis. The next topic, I think, is probably one of the biggest issues that exist nowadays is baltashkas. Um, Now, one of the main points of kaparis is that the kapara goes to feeding the poor. So if the kapara is being thrown out, then you're missing the whole point of the tzedakah part, which tzedakah is one of the things tzedakah tassel mimavas, which is one of the main things of kaparis. Next off is baltashkas is an aveira. Kaparis is only a minhag, and like we said before, a minhag cannot make that you're going to do an aveira. So if it's being thrown out, it seems like you shouldn't be doing kaparis. So much so that there are some paiskim who maintain that if the chicken will be thrown out, even if it's kosher, meaning if it's a treifa, then everybody agrees it's not a problem. Just like by regular shkita, if you shecht it and it's not kosher, if it's a treifa, it's not baltashkas. However, if it is kosher and you're still throwing it out, some places can maintain that that's Darkei Mary. That's mamish what the goyim do. They would kill something as an offering to whatever it is, and then throw it out. They wouldn't eat it because it belongs. It's been used for whatever purpose they wanted, and now it's no longer for food. So there are a lot of places who hold that even though kaparis isn't a problem, if you're throwing it out, then it's Darkei Mary. So it's mamish a question of Darkei Amayri. Now, almost everybody agrees nowadays, with the exclusion of some Ungarish Rabbanim, that if a person is going to be throwing out his chickens, it's better not to do kaparis on chickens at all. There are some Ungarish Rabbanim who hold that if you're throwing it out and you're only using it for kaparis, it's fine because it served its purpose and therefore it's no longer baltashkas. But Al Pi Raiv, almost every Rav nowadays holds that it's better not to do kaparis on the chicken if it's going to be thrown out. And there's a very important thing I know in Crown Heights, I know NCFJE, I think 1414, they try to kasher as many chickens as they can before kaparis. But there are many places in Crown Heights where they lechatchila. It's not that they ran out of time, which, by the way, it's very hard to run out of time because you could cash it for 72 hours. So technically, they could do it after Kaparos also. Um, but that we're not discussing that now. Um, but there are many people who throw it out like a So, if a person wants to be sure that their chicken is going to be eaten, the best thing is you take after a shechted, you take your own chicken home, kasher it yourself. It's really not that complicating. You could just take off the skin, soak it in, submerge it in water for an hour. Sorry, for a half hour, then salt it for an hour, covering it completely with kosher salt. Um, Inside and out. Obviously, take out your guts and take out the guts before soaking it, obviously, and make sure the inside has no guts stuck to the wall, especially the lungs. It's very easy to miss, and that could actually make a mechitzah for the licha. But the best thing is you do it yourself. You know it's getting eaten, and you can give the value of the chicken to tzedakah instead, or make sure to do it at a place that it's actually going to be eaten. Um, Most of these places, you could go and help them out for a couple of minutes, making sure that your chicken makes it through the process. Also, is a good idea. Um, Fine. Next topic is Kabbalah. So, um, the Shach, which is obviously a halakha commentary, writes that not only is kaparis the right thing to do halakhically, but that also based on the Kabbanis Hari, he brings down that the Arizal would do it in the morning after slichus because right at in the beginning of the morning there's a kutch al chesed, and it's a time of rachamim, and therefore it's a good thing to do. Now, many Sfardim are very, very big fans of Kabbalah, more than many other Yidden, and therefore, even though the Beis Yosef wrote not to, um, many Sfardim still do it nowadays because al pi Kabbalah it's the right thing to do. Now, in general, as a rule, when Kabbalah does not go against halacha, we follow Kabbalah. This is brought down a lot, especially in the topic of beards. That if Kabbalah says that you're not allowed to touch your beard, and halacha doesn't say that you are allowed to, then basically it's abstracted based on Kabbalah that you're allowed to. But over here, you can't really say that because the Beis Yosef says Yesh Lamnaya, the Rashba, and the Ramban hold that you shouldn't, and therefore it's more that Kabbalah is taking a side than paskening with nobody else agreeing. Sorry, disagreeing. Okay, the next thing is kapara versus tshuva. Um, the Rambam holds that there is no such thing as kapara nowadays. Kapara only existed in times of the Beis Hamikdash with karbanis, where karbanis was a kapara. And he holds that nowadays there's only tshuva. For this reason, many people hold that the Rambam was against kaparas, because he doesn't hold of fasting as a kapara. He doesn't hold of kapara in general. Now, as Lubavitchers, we learn Tanya, and in the Geras HaTshuva, the Alter Rebbe actually explains the Rambam's opinion. In the first parak, he explains that kapara, as your avera goes onto that thing and then Hashem forgives you, doesn't exist. But in the second parak, and in that regard, the Alter Rebbe actually agrees with the Rambam that Yitaka can't get a kapara nowadays. But in Parak Beis of the Geras HaTshuva, he goes on to explain that there's a different part of kapara, which is that when we don't do a mitzvah or we do an avera, we make where basically the mitzvah would have brought down an areliki, it would have been a gili elikos, and when we don't do the mitzvah or we do an avera, then that areliki is missing. Now, if we do certain mitzvahs, we could replace that light with a different light, with a different areliki, with a different gili elikos, and in that regard, there is a kapara. In filling the gap, in that regard, there is a kapara, and therefore, based on that, we could say that the kapara nowadays that we're doing by kaparis, we'll talk about in a second, the kavanis behind kaparis, but we could say that the kapara we're doing nowadays isn't that our sins are going onto the chicken, which is what a lot of people think it is, but rather that we're bringing the nachas ruach to Hashem, and that's the point of kaparis, and that still applies nowadays. So and the Rambam isn't necessarily arguing with Alter Rebbe. We don't know what the Rambam's opinion would be on this aspect of kapara, and therefore it could be that in this regard the Rambam would agree with Alter Rebbe, and he would therefore agree with kaparas. So there's no proof that the Rambam was against kaparas in any way. Only that the kapara, in the sense that there was in the Beis Hamikdash's times, we don't have nowadays. Fine. Now, by kaparas, one of the main points of kaparas is um, what we think during kaparas. So the first thing is that the chicken is going through pain. Pain a lot of times for all of us is something to wake us up. We see in the Torah, even if you look at the Teichicha and any other time where Hashem says how not good things can happen, is that it's meant to wake the person up to realize that he should change his ways. Um, Even the whole thing of Yena, which we read on Yom Kippur, that he says if you don't change your ways, then bad things are going to happen, and bad things are always a wake up call for people. And the idea is to wake up before bad things happen to us. And one of the ways of getting us to that point is noticing that the chicken is going through pain. So it's very common that a lot of women don't want to see the shchita because it's gross and or they feel bad for the chicken, and they should be encouraged to look, because that is the whole point of kaparis. Obviously, they shouldn't be just encouraged to look without understanding that this is what they're meant to be thinking about. But the pain and suffering that the chicken is going through is meant to be a wake-up call for ourselves also, and we are meant to think about it. We're very insensitive to it because we grew up going to kaparis, and we laugh at the people who come, oh, the chickens are suffering, but we're meant to think about the suffering of the chicken. It's meant to be, that's one of the main points, are that the chicken should suffer, and we should recognize that and change our ways so that we don't suffer. That is one of that is one of the main points. Um, Now it is brought down in some Paiskim that we should also make it go through the Arba Mitzvahs Bezdin. So there's a minhag to throw it down on the ground. Um, it's not so clear if you're meant to do when it's alive or when it's dead. Obviously, if you throw it down on the ground when it's alive, it's a schooler for the chicken to run away and you never find it again. Um, versus when it's already shafted and dead, if it's thrown down like a skilla, then that's that. Harag, it's being shafted. When the shechet holds the chicken and gets ready for shkita, it does tfisa, which would be chenek. It's essentially choking the chicken. Um, and sreifa, there's a minhag to burn some of the feathers. And that's meant to be a reminder for us about the Arba Mitzvahs Bezdin that we're chayav for, similar to what we say by Krishma at night. And then obviously the main thing is tshuva, that we should actually regret our averis and think how we're going to do better, and all the details in regards to tshuva. For full details, see Igeres HaTshuva. The next thing is we should imagine if we were the chicken. Imagine we're walking around one day and the next second we're dead. How would it be if we died right now? We'd be going Lamaila, and what would we say? What would we do? And just like for the chicken, it's living its life. Suddenly, some traumatic thing happens to it and it's no longer alive. We should actually think about that. How does that affect, that could be us. That's something scary to think about, and sometimes scary to think about is the right thing that we need. And lastly, our mortality. Just a lot of times we think we're invincible. I'm here now, I'm going to be here tomorrow. I'll be able to do tshuva tomorrow. No, not necessarily. Just because you're around doesn't mean anything. And it's a scary thought, and like I said, that's the point of kaparas. Okay, when does a person have to redo kaparas? So to start, just a quick distinction. There's a difference between nevela and a treifa. Um, so we always say, oh, it's treif. We call chocolate bar treif. But treif is a very specific term for a internal problem with the um, animal or chicken or bird that makes it not kosher. So it could be shechted properly, and there will be a problem with, for example, the lungs that make that it is not kosher, even though it was shechted properly. So kaparas only needs to be done if it's a nevela. Nevela means that it was dead before the sheikhet shechted it, or the shechita was done improperly. If it wasn't shechted properly, that's a nevela. So if it just dies, it's a nevela, not a treifa. So if it's an Avela, a person has to redo Kaparos, and whether or not you have to pay for the new chicken or the people running Kaparos have to pay for it is depending on whose fault it is. If the sheikh that's holding the chicken and the chicken jumps and bumps into the knife and it's no longer a kosher shkita, um, or the knife had a gam, then that is probably the responsibility of either the sheikh or the people running Kaparos, and the sheikh has to have that arranged beforehand. Um, and and that's who should pay for for the new chicken. Is if it died while you were holding it, that's probably more your responsibility, and you would probably have to pay for a new one. All right. So one more thing, that um once the sheikh chefs and it's a good shkita, you're yesa even if it's a treifa. If there's a problem inside and it can't be eaten, it's still a good kapars. All right. The next topic is kisei adam. Um, a lot of shaykhim have a lot to say on this. This is a very sensitive issue for a lot of shaykhim. Some don't care, but let's go through it. Okay, so first of all, whose mitzvah is it to do kisei adam? So the source of the mitzvah is, it says v'shatach esdamu b'kiso ba'afar. Therefore, the person who spilled the blood, which is the sheikhet, should cover the blood, and it's his mitzvah. The same person who did the v'shatach esdamu should be the one to v'kiso ba'afar. That's brought down everywhere across the board. It's a sheikhet's mitzvah. Now, only if the sheikhet doesn't cover it, then it says "Va'omer lebnei Yisrael." By that pasuk, it says "Va'omer lebnei Yisrael," which means that every yid has a mitzvah to cover the blood if it wasn't covered. Meaning it's not exclusively the sheikhet's mitzvah, but it is first his mitzvah. Now, if the sheikhet left, every yid has a mitzvah to cover it. However, if the sheikhet is still there and the person does it without permission, the person owes him money for taking away his bracha, which is a sarazovim. It's a lot of money. However, it's brought down in in halacha that nowadays we don't collect knasim unless there is monetary value. So if you take away somebody's mitzvah, unless it caused him monetary value, a monetary loss, then you don't have to pay him nowadays. However, a person should be careful not to steal somebody else's mitzvah, or in this case, a bracha, because you're not actually stealing the mitzvah, because every yid technically has a mitzvah, but you did take away his bracha. Okay, the next question is, can a sheikh give away the mitzvah? It's brought down in a lot of mitzvahs that a person is not allowed to be mevazeh mitzvahs. Now, one of the ways of being mevazeh mitzvah is saying, I don't care about it, somebody else should do it. Now, so in Paiskim, there's a disagreement if the only way to let somebody else do the mitzvah is as an honor or a shliach, which means either it's for example, a rav comes to the shkita plant or to the kaparis, and I'm being mechabed the rav with a mitzvah. So obviously, I care so much for the mitzvah that I'm using it as a kibbut, and like that, you're not being mevaz in the mitzvah. Or as a shliach, I want to do the mitzvah, and therefore I'm making you my shliach to do my mitzvah, and therefore it's not a thing. And there are some people who say that the other one, that each one of those has an aspect of disrespect, that even if you're giving it to a rav, still you want it for yourself, and giving it away is a problem, as versus a shliach where I'm still doing the mitzvah, I'm not being mevazed, or in the other way where you don't want to do it yourself and therefore you're giving a shliach, and that's a bizui, versus giving it to a rav is giving kaveh to the mitzvah, that it's being done by a holy person. Nowadays, we do a mitzvah. We do a mixture of both. We're mechabed the person to be our shliach, and therefore, according to both sides, it's not as much of a problem. However, some people hold that you could only honor someone who should be honored. For example, a rav. And women and children aren't people who should be honored. That's something reserved for a Rav, and therefore you're not allowed to give them the mitzvah. So this is what some people hold. Taka nowadays. Now, by Lila Seder, it brings down that people who are honorable should lean to the left, and there are Mefarshim who explain that nowadays women and children are also considered people who should be honored, and therefore they should also lean during the Seder. And this is obviously something that we follow nowadays. Based on this, we could say that al pi halacha, women and children are also able to be honored, and therefore the honor aspect of the mitzvah could apply to them also. Now, others say, since the whole problem is busy mitzvah, and Erev Yom Kippur is a time to be mechavev mitzvahs. We try to do every mitzvah we could get, especially ones that are hard to come by. And the sheket is just helping other people do mitzvahs. So the whole problem doesn't apply. It's similar to um, if you're learning, how could you go and give away the mitzvah of learning Torah to help another person put on tefillin? No, it's not. It's not that I'm being mevazah Torah. I love mitzvahs so much, and I love other yidden so much, and therefore I want to help them do mitzvahs as much as they can. And that would be the idea that the sheikh is helping other people do mitzvahs, and it's b'chal not busy mitzvah. I love yidden doing mitzvahs so much that I'm helping them do this mitzvah that they normally can't do. And some people say that this entire issue doesn't even begin in the first place nowadays, since it's already minhag Yisrael, and that's taken nowadays what people hold at kedei kach, where you could say that even if the sheikh doesn't give permission by Kaparos, he doesn't have the right to withhold permission, since it's a social contract, in a way that it's already the accepted minhag that people at Kaparos get to do the kisei adam. Now, there's a debate on whether or not the sheikhet, that basically you should pay the sheikhet for the mitzvah, because if the sheikhet's selling the mitzvah, that's the biggest busy mitzvah there is. I have a mitzvah, but you know what? I could make a little, but I could make a little bit of money on the mitzvah. That seems like a very big embarrassment to the mitzvah. However, if you're taking the person's mitzvah, you should try to make him happy. There's you're not paying him at Sar Zohovim, but you should still at least make him, try to appease him for taking his mitzvah. So the best thing is to tip the sheikh for the service, and that'll make him happy. And at the same time, you're not paying him for the mitzvah; you're paying him for the service, and therefore it checks all the boxes and doesn't make any issues. But tipping the sheikh is a good thing, especially if you're doing kisei adam. Regardless, it's a good thing, but we'll talk about that soon. Okay, the next big issue with kisei adam is splitting a mitzvah. When the sheikh does kisei adam, he makes one bracha for all the chickens. Ad kedei kach, that if a person had in mind only to shecht a certain amount of chickens, so the bracha on shkita is only for that amount. And then after somebody brings him other chickens, so he has to make a new bracha on those chickens. The halacha is that he makes a bracha on kisei adam on everything he shechted till then, and then he has in mind all the chickens that he will cover later on, which means that we're very careful about bracha, that he shouldn't make an extra bracha. Ad kedei kach, that he could do sometimes even on everything in the future. So the question is, how could it be that so many people are making brachas on kisei adam when all the blood is being spilled by one sheikhet? And especially if they're his shliach, how could he have many different shluchim for all one big mitzvah, essentially? Now, some Rabbanim hold that because of this problem, you can't have more than one person doing kisei adam. If you want, you could be mechaber one person to do it. If you're going to many different houses, you could have one person in each house doing kisei adam. But to have everybody in line doing their own kisei adam, some Rabbanim taka hold it's an issue. However, most Rabbanim hold that it's not a problem. Why? Because every yid, like we said before, that every yid has a bracha to cover blood which was spilled. So it's not that they're all making many brachas on one mitzvah, but rather each one has their own mitzvah, and they're all making their own bracha on their own mitzvah. Also, it's important to note that although the mitzvah is technically done, meaning if the sheikhet only covers one drop from every chicken, then already the mitzvah is completed, and however, the mitzvah still exists until every drop is covered, which means he fulfills the obligation when he covers even one drop, but the mitzvah still exists until every drop is covered, which is why you can have, we'll see in a second, why you can have many people covering it at once. Next, when should a person do kisei adam? So, kisei adam can only be done after we know that it's a good shkita. Now, how do we know it's a good shkita? When the sheikh checks his knife after shechting the chickens, and he sees that there's no pgamim on it, then he knows that it was a good shkita. Until then, we don't know that it was a good shkita. Therefore, everybody needs to wait for the sheikh to check the knife before making a bracha on kisei adam, because making a bracha on kisei adam, it only exists when you do a good shkita. If it's a pasal shkita, you're not allowed to make a bracha on it. Now, we said before that multiple people can cover the same at the same time until every drop of blood is covered, because the mitzvah exists till then. Um, However, if you do it before the sheikh checks a knife, it's a safek bracha levatal. Now, if he checks a knife after and you already made the bracha before, it's fine. Then it's a good bracha lemafreya. However, you're not allowed to make a bracha if it's a safek bracha levatal, especially because safek bracha lahakel. Um, so it's important to wait, and sometimes the sheikh only checks a knife every 5 minutes or 7 minutes, and essentially what you have to do is if you want to do the mitzvah of kisei dam, you have to get your chicken shechted, move to the side, wait for him to check his knife, and then you could have all the last, whatever it is, 20, 30 people who got their chicken shechted in the last 5 minutes. Everybody could come, take a scoop of sawdust or whatever else you're using for kisei dam, and make the bracha al kisei dam ba'afar, and cover a drop of blood somewhere. It doesn't take a lot. You could take a pinch of sawdust even, and do it as long as the wind doesn't completely blow it away, and that helps. Now, you could say, okay, I want to do kiss adam, but I don't want to make 5 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come with my chicken. I'm going to tell the sheikh, could you do me a favor? Can you please check your knife? And imagine that happens to the sheikh every 30 seconds, and you have a long line of people waiting to have their chicken shechted, and you have this yokel telling you what to do. You can understand that that's probably going to make the sheikh quite upset. And it brings down that it's very, very important not to get the sheikh upset, because the whole point of Kaparos, first of all, Kaparos has a aspect of Darke and Meir already, and it brings down that anger is Kolokais, Kilu, Avad Dezara. And every Yom Kippur is a time to ask forgiveness and not get somebody angry. So obviously, and we try to do kaparas at a time of chesed and rachamim. So obviously, getting the sheikh angry is not the way to do it. Either don't do the mitzvah of kisei dam. It's not your mitzvah in the first place. If you care enough about it, go wait on the side for the sheikh to check his knife and do it after. And also another thing to help with the sheikh not getting angry is giving him a tip. Versteht. That'll make him very happy. Um, so yeah, this is probably the biggest issue, is that people always make the bracha before checking their knife, and this is a very important thing that if you want to do a mitzvah, do it right. Making a bracha which is lechatchila safek bracha levatala is not a very good idea at all. Also, another thing is that if there is a pagam on the knife, you have to redo kaparas. So it's a good idea to wait around in general for the sheikh to check the knife, even though it's it could be 5, 10 minutes. It shouldn't be 10 minutes. It should be 5 around there. But um, either way, it's a good idea to wait around, and then you can do the bracha after. And l'chaim v'levracha. Just another few tips for kaparis in general. Um, if the chicken's upside down, even if it starts, everybody's always afraid of the chicken using the bathroom all over your head. If you hold it upside down, usually you're able to feel if it starts letting out its last meal over your head. You're able to feel it and take it down. You could also do it in a basket or a cardboard box or a bag, whatever it is. Keeping the chicken calm is a very good idea. In general, putting his feet down on a table or ground. And then the two best ways, like we said before, either hold the right wing over left wing, which is usually how they hold it by shkita, or holding the wings to the side. Another thing is that the shechtim are usually used to moving at a certain pace. They're used to use shechting. Hopefully they're used to shechting in a plant. If they're very inexperienced, then that could sometimes be an issue. But they're usually used to going at a rate of around 15 chickens a minute. And then they're going to kaparas where they're having maybe 2, 3 a minute. So the faster you're able to get the chickens to the sheikhet, the better. So if you're holding the chicken right and you give it to the person holding it for the sheikhet, it'll make the sheikhet happy. Just as a practical bit of advice. Yeah, l'chaim v'lebracha.